My name is Professor Mark Talbot. I'm a palliative medicine consultant in Cardiff, in Wales, where I'm also a clinical director and I'm lead for Wales for future care planning. So all things relating to future care plans, DNA CPR forms, advanced care planning type documents, and policy making as well, and advise Welsh Government on those matters as well. Yeah, I've included a helpful little map of where Wales is for the international audience members. So Wales next to England, part of the United Kingdom, and off Wales has its own Senedd, its own Welsh government, but only certain areas are devolved. And it's a little bit different again to Scotland, who have more devolved powers in terms of what they're able to do. But Wales would essentially, if the Kim Ledbetter bill that David has outlined just now, co-opt the English bill, if you like. And I call it the English bill because it's been very much written with England in mind, and Wales very much as a second thought, which is really also one of the areas that we were concerned about in this. So the BBC reported on this very recently. There was a vote in Wales, so-called legislative consent motion vote to adopt whatever is voted on essentially in Westminster, which went through, and I'll give you a little bit more detail about this. But the reporting from the BBC was quite poor, and I'll really go into that a little bit later on as well. Yeah, the terminally ill adults bill that we're talking to here introduces a private members bill, as David has said. It essentially seeks to amend the UK Suicide Act from 1961 to protect individuals acting within its provisions from criminal liability, and then sets out the regulatory framework for how assistance must be provided. Assisting suicide outside these provisions would remain an offence under the Suicide Act. The UK government maintains a neutral stance on the passage of the bill, and back in October 2024, the Welsh Senedd actually held a non-binding vote on assisted dying and rejected the principle of assisted dying. So also noteworthy. So after many debates and lots of conversation, and many of us talking to members of the Senedd in terms of our more broad and general concerns, they voted against the general principle. So this more recent vote in 2026 was a different matter, and I'll tell you a little bit about that, because it was a motion on whatever the law that the UK government was going to pull through was going to be, and whether Wales would accept this as such. So why was legislative consent needed from Wales? It was required because there are some areas, such as healthcare, that are devolved to Wales, but law is not. So it was really kind of getting more detail on guidance about the operation of the Act, finding out detail about regulations on how voluntary assisted dying services would operate in Wales, and see how monitoring by a voluntary assisted dying commissioner would work, and also requirements for bilingual information. And again, for international audience members here tonight, Wales has another language, or primary language, if you like, which is Welsh. So diolch yn fawr for having me at this meeting tonight. Diolch yn fawr is Welsh for thank you very much. But there is a separate language, and for some people in Wales, Welsh is their first language, and English is only their second language. So these are important things to consider. So why was, again, legislative consent needed? UK Parliament seeks the Senate's consent before legislating in this devolved area of Wales. It's a politically rather than legally binding convention, and UK governments can still proceed if the Senate withholds its consent. Welsh Government had laid a legislative consent memorandum on the 9th of April 2025, followed by a supplementary legislative consent memorandum on 4th of July 2025. And then further supplementary legislative consent memoranda were laid covering amendments in the House of Lords during the committee stage, which had not been agreed, and the House of Lords debate goes on. I won't say too much about that in the interest of brevity. Here's a few of us who have been involved with talking to Senate members. We also got the actress Liz Carr, who you can see second from left here, who came to the Senate with us and talked about some of the issues as they affect disabled people. But yeah, a group of us clinicians also wrote a letter, an open letter to members of the Senate in terms of laying out our concerns, why we felt this current bill in Westminster is actually dangerous, is actually inadequate, is too vague, and why we felt it would not work for Wales in particular. And the letter, I won't read all of it out, but it's a matter of public record. This letter looks at things like the UK Mental Capacity Act, which wasn't really designed to access suicidality. It looks at eligibility to access these legal drugs, especially for people who feel a burden or because of a lack of services. And one of our real concerns was that palliative care is not equal. And we know that as palliative care clinicians. Some areas have good access to palliative care. Some people, palliative care is pretty much absent. There's a health board not far from me, and I had a phone call from it not too long ago when I was on call one night about a patient who was dying and really wanted to die at home. And we couldn't even provide in that health board overnight district nurses. That's not even palliative care nurses. That's not even palliative care professionals. That's just general district nurses to cover things like, changing the medications, changing a syringe driver, changing a catheter. So that person had to go into hospital to die. So when there's such an inadequate provision of such services, we felt it was very important to get those services much better. Otherwise, that person may feel, well, I don't have an option. I don't have any palliative care. So my only real option to play it really safe is to opt for an assisted dying service. And we felt that wasn't right. Just briefly take you through some of the slides that I shared on my social media about some of the issues we felt were important. For instance, that the UK government had devolved powers to Scotland, so that Scotland can make its own decision on legalizing assisted suicide, as you heard from Danielle earlier as well. And we wondered why it hadn't done the same thing for Wales. Westminster, it had all been done in a backward stage, as I've said previously. MPs had voted initially to give Wales the power to decide when assisted dying comes into force. But then later at report stage, Kim Leadbeater, sponsor of the bill, insisted these powers be stripped out. And MSs, in our view, should demand that this power is given back to Wales. I think Wales has been treated quite shabbily in this whole process, whether you believe in assisted dying or not. But Welsh Government has actually had to update its legislative consent motion multiple times because the sponsor keeps changing the goalposts. And the bill is still in flux, so we're really consenting on something that we don't know. We don't know the end product in many ways. And it changes the foundation of the NHS in Wales. Again, for international audience members, the NHS is kind of a big pride of Wales because the NHS father, the father of the NHS is Welsh, and Myron Bevan, and you're really rewriting the foundations of the NHS if assisted dying comes in. So just to really recap, every assessment, every panel session, everything would fall to Welsh health boards and Welsh ministers, but the bill was very much designed for England, with Wales's needs tacked on, and really second, really as an afterthought. If it had been a government bill, a proper government bill, rather than a private member's bill, then this would have been looked at in far more detail. The vote on this legislative consent motion in the end went in the favor of the assisted dying bill being consented to. I'll put it that way. I think many Senate members were concerned about this bill, but they were perhaps persuaded that if they didn't consent to whatever Westminster produced, they would have something imposed, or that the NHS wouldn't deliver it, but it would be delivered via backdoor private services. And I think there was quite a lot of scaremongering from the campaign groups and Dignity in Dying and some politicians as well, because we don't believe that would have been the case as such. So I'll stop there, I think.